Log analysis is the craft of extracting meaning from event records so that actions in a system can be explained, defended, and, when necessary, challenged. I treat logs as a kind of operational memory because they capture what systems observed at the time events occurred, not what we wish had happened after the fact. When that memory is collected and interpreted carefully, it supports accountability by showing who did what, from where, and under what conditions. When it is collected poorly or analyzed casually, it becomes a misleading narrative generator that wastes time and can even point investigations in the wrong direction. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to the CISS books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. In forensic work, log analysis is largely about reconstructing a timeline and developing credible attribution of actions to actors. Timeline reconstruction means ordering events across systems to understand sequence, causality, and escalation, especially when an attacker moves laterally, changes privileges, or blends into normal operations. Attribution here is not a dramatic claim about identity, and it is the disciplined linkage of activity to accounts, endpoints, network locations, and authentication artifacts that explain how an action became possible. The best forensic conclusions are cautious and evidence-driven, because logs often provide strong indicators of what happened while still leaving uncertainty about intent or the ultimate human behind a keyboard. Compliance-focused log analysis aims at a different target, even though it uses many of the same raw sources. The goal is to demonstrate that required events are captured, that retention meets obligations, and that control operation can be proven during a defined period. In this mode, I am often less interested in unusual one-off anomalies and more interested in consistency, coverage, and the ability to produce evidence on demand. A compliance question might be whether administrative actions are logged, whether access to sensitive records is traceable, or whether security monitoring controls actually generated alerts and follow-up actions when conditions were met. To make either forensic or compliance analysis viable at scale, normalization becomes essential because log formats vary wildly across vendors and platforms. Normalization aligns different event schemas into consistent fields such as actor, target, action, outcome, source address, and device identity, so searches and correlations behave predictably. This is not about forcing every record into a bland, uniform shape, and it is about mapping key attributes so that the same analytical question can be asked across endpoints, servers, network devices, and cloud services. When normalization is incomplete, investigators waste time translating formats mentally, and compliance teams struggle to show consistent evidence because every dataset requires a different interpretation. Time alignment is the quiet foundation under all serious log work, because a timeline that cannot be trusted is not a timeline at all. Consistent timestamps require synchronized system clocks across infrastructure, and that typically means using a time service that enforces a common reference and detects drift. Even small differences matter when you are tracking an attacker who executes a chain of actions quickly, or when you are trying to prove that an access review or control action occurred within a required window. I also pay close attention to time zones, daylight saving shifts, and clock changes, because these can create the illusion of impossible sequences unless they are normalized and documented clearly. The usefulness of analysis rises or falls with the sources you collect, and key sources span identity systems, endpoints, servers, networks, and cloud services. Identity logs tell you about authentication, authorization decisions, session creation, privilege assignment, and account lifecycle events, which are central to both investigations and control verification. Endpoint and server logs capture process execution, configuration changes, service starts, file modifications, and security tool events that can reveal persistence and data access. Network and cloud service logs fill in the path between systems, showing connections, API calls, storage access, administrative actions, and the often critical control plane activity that attackers frequently target. Correlation is where individual records become a coherent story because it links events across systems to track actions end to end. A single suspicious sign-in is interesting, but it becomes much more meaningful when it is linked to a token issuance, a privileged role change, a burst of API calls, and then access to a sensitive data store. Effective correlation often relies on stable identifiers, such as session identifiers, request identifiers, device identifiers, and account identifiers, along with consistent timestamp alignment. When correlation is done well, it reduces guesswork by showing a chain of related activity rather than a pile of isolated alerts, and it makes both incident reconstruction and compliance proof far more defensible. Log integrity controls protect this entire discipline from collapsing under doubt, because logs that can be altered cannot support trustworthy conclusions. The most basic integrity measure is restricting write access so that only approved collectors and systems can append records, while administrators and analysts have read access but cannot modify historical entries. Stronger approaches include immutability controls, cryptographic validation, and separated duties so that no single role can both generate events and alter the repository that stores them. In practice, I treat the logging pipeline itself as a high-value system because an attacker who can tamper with logs can erase traces of compromise or create false narratives that waste responders' time. Even when integrity is protected, parsing errors and missing fields can quietly reduce the reliability of analytical conclusions. If a log source changes its format, if a collector truncates events, or if a parser fails to extract fields consistently, correlation and search results become unpredictable. Missing actor fields can turn a clear accountability trail into ambiguity, and inconsistent outcome fields can make failures look like successes or vice versa. I always interpret conclusions in the context of data quality, because strong confidence requires knowing that the data pipeline is stable, complete, and correctly mapped. When quality is weak, the honest conclusion is often conditional, and that condition must be stated clearly so decisions are not made on false certainty. Noise reduction is what makes analysis usable, because raw event volume can overwhelm even well-designed teams and tools. Filtering removes known benign events that do not contribute to objectives. Grouping clusters similar events to reveal patterns, and baselining defines what normal looks like so abnormal stands out. Baselining is especially important because many environments produce constant background churn, including scheduled tasks, health checks, and automated configuration management that can look suspicious when viewed out of context. The purpose is not to hide data, and it is to make meaningful signals visible while preserving the ability to drill back into raw records when a real investigation demands it. Retention strategy matters because many investigations begin long after the initial compromise, especially in stealthy intrusions where attackers move slowly and avoid detection. Long retention supports the ability to reconstruct early footholds, initial credential abuse, and gradual privilege escalation that may not trigger immediate alarms. Retention also intersects with compliance obligations, which often specify minimum periods and sometimes specify accessibility requirements for producing evidence within defined response times. The practical challenge is balancing cost, performance, and legal obligations while ensuring the retained data remains searchable and usable rather than archived into a format that is technically present but operationally inaccessible. Privacy concerns emerge quickly because logs often contain identifiers and detailed user activity that can be sensitive even when no breach has occurred. Usernames, device identifiers, Internet protocol addresses, geolocation hints, and activity histories can reveal patterns about individuals, work habits, and sometimes personal data if applications log too much context. Good practice is to collect what is necessary for objectives, reduce or redact unnecessary sensitive fields, and enforce strict access controls so only authorized roles can view detailed records. Privacy is not the enemy of security, and it is a constraint that forces disciplined logging design so that accountability and investigation capability do not become a surveillance program by accident.
Reporting is where analysis becomes actionable because it summarizes patterns, anomalies, and evidence aligned to objectives rather than dumping raw queries into a document. For forensic reporting, I focus on sequence, scope, and confidence, explaining what happened, how I know, where uncertainty remains, and what artifacts support the narrative. For compliance reporting, I focus on proof of control operation, demonstrating that required events were captured, that controls functioned as intended, and that evidence is tied clearly to requirement statements and time windows. In both cases, the report must connect technical observations to the question being answered, because an accurate log finding that does not align to an objective is just trivia.
The most important discipline in log analysis is remembering that the same data can serve different masters, and you must be clear about which master you are serving at any moment. Forensics demands reconstruction and credible attribution of actions through careful correlation, time alignment, and integrity-protected records. Compliance demands proof that controls operate and that evidence is available, complete, and bounded in time, with definitions stable enough to withstand scrutiny. Both require normalization, quality management, and noise reduction to keep the process reliable and repeatable under real operational pressure. When you design logging and analysis with these goals in mind, logs become a foundation for both accountability and truth, supporting proof of control and incident reconstruction in a way that holds up when it matters most. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.